She's administrative staff, the VP told the acquisition team with a dismissive wave. I sat quietly taking notes, as I had for 7 years at TechVision Dynamics. No one questioned why an admin was present during a billion-dollar negotiation. I watched the suited men discuss my innovations like they were their own, until the buyer's due diligence team entered with a thick folder. We found something interesting, their lawyer said, sliding a document forward. 39 critical patents, all registered to Annemarie Harrison. Their eyes turned to me. 10 years earlier, I graduated at the top of my class with a degree in electrical engineering from Ohio State University. My professors had praised my innovative thinking, and I dreamed of designing the next generation of microprocessors. But my timing couldn't have been worse. The recession hit just as I received my diploma, and engineering jobs vanished overnight. After 6 months of rejections and my student loans entering repayment, I reluctantly applied for an administrative assistant position at TechVision Dynamics, a mid-sized tech company specializing in sensor technology. It's just temporary, I told myself as I accepted the offer. Just until the market improves. My first day, I met my boss, Chief Technology Officer Jeff Blackwell. He was buried under a mountain of paperwork, looking completely overwhelmed. "Thank goodness you're here, Annemarie," he sighed. "I need these reports organized by priority, these schedules aligned, and can you figure out what happened to the Thompson proposal? It was supposed to be submitted yesterday." Within 3 hours, I had his chaotic office functioning with military precision. By the end of the week, I had created a filing system that reduced his administrative workload by 30%. "You're a miracle worker," Jeff said, genuinely impressed. "Where did you learn these organizational skills?" "Engineering school," I replied with a small smile. "Designing systems is what we do." His eyebrows rose. "You're an engineer?" "I was supposed to be," I admitted. The job market had other ideas. Over the next few months, I couldn't help but notice technical problems as I processed reports and organized meetings. When Jeff mentioned a persistent issue with signal interference in a new product line, I spent my lunch break sketching a potential solution. "This might help," I said tentatively, sliding the napkin across his desk. Jeff studied my drawing with increasing interest. This could actually work. "Let me show this to the team." 2 days later, my lunch break doodle became the foundation for a product fix that saved a contract worth $2 million. But my name never appeared on any documentation. I was just doing my job, keeping things running smoothly. 6 months into my temporary position, I met Tom Wyatt, a senior engineer in his 50s who always thanked me by name and treated me with respect. Unlike other engineers who barely acknowledged my existence, Tom noticed when I reorganized the lab request forms to be more efficient. "You think like an engineer," he observed one day when we were alone. "I am one," I replied. "Or I was supposed to be." From that day forward, Tom became my ally. He'd casually leave technical journals on my desk, discuss engineering challenges within earshot, and occasionally ask my opinion on technical matters when no one else was around. For 2 years, I performed my administrative duties flawlessly, while quietly contributing technical solutions whenever possible. I streamlined processes, reorganized departments, and occasionally slipped technical suggestions to Tom, who would introduce them as something I've been thinking about. When a junior engineer position finally opened, I applied immediately, believing my demonstrated skills and unofficial contributions would outweigh my lack of formal experience. The interview with the engineering team went surprisingly well. My intimate knowledge of company projects impressed them, and my technical solutions to their test problems showed my capabilities hadn't diminished during my time answering phones and scheduling meetings. I left the interview feeling hopeful for the first time in years. Finally, my career would get back on track. 3 days later, I was called to the office of Douglas Ward, VP of Operations. My heart sank the moment I saw his expression. "Annemarie, I'm sorry, but we've decided to go with an external candidate for the engineer position." "May I ask why?" I managed to keep my voice steady. Douglas leaned back in his leather chair. "Frankly, you're too valuable in your current role. Do you know how hard it is to find someone with your organizational skills? Jeff says the department would fall apart without you. But I'm an engineer, I protested. That's what I trained for. Douglas's smile didn't reach his eyes. Look, Annemarie, some people are meant to support, not lead. You're excellent at what you do. Why risk that for something that might not work out? Be realistic. I felt as if I'd been punched in the stomach. My engineering degree, my technical contributions, my proven problem-solving abilities, none of it mattered. I was just an admin, and in Douglas's eyes, that's all I would ever be. That evening, Tom found me in the break room, staring blankly at a cold cup of coffee. I heard about the decision, he said quietly, sitting across from me. It's not right. Is it because I'm a woman? I asked, the question I'd been afraid to voice. Tom sighed deeply. Partly. But it's also about the boxes people put us in. Once they see you as support staff, it's hard for them to reimagine you as anything else. He leaned forward. But listen carefully, Annemarie. This company has a toxic culture, especially toward women in technical roles. You've seen the turnover. I had. Female engineers rarely lasted more than 18 months at TechVision. Be patient, Tom advised. Sometimes the long game is the only one worth playing. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If TechVision wouldn't recognize me officially as an engineer, I would document my contributions in a way they couldn't ignore. I converted my apartment's spare bedroom into a makeshift lab, purchasing equipment piece by piece from online auctions and garage sales. Nothing fancy, but enough to test concepts and build prototypes. By day, I remained the perfect administrative assistant. I organized meetings, managed schedules, ordered lunches, and made everyone's professional life easier. But at night, I was the engineer I'd always been meant to be. I started keeping meticulous notes on every technical suggestion I made, every solution I provided, no matter how small. I documented dates, times, and the specific problems addressed. I carefully recorded when my ideas were implemented and their outcomes. 6 months after my rejected application, the company hit a major roadblock with its next-generation sensor array. The engineering team had been working overtime for weeks with no breakthrough. In meetings I transcribed, I watched brilliant minds struggle with the same problem I'd been pondering at home. What about shifting the signal processing algorithm to compensate for the interference? I suggested to Tom during one of our quiet conversations. His eyes lit up. That might actually work. Do you have any specific thoughts on implementation? That weekend, I stayed up for 36 hours straight, developing a prototype algorithm that addressed the interference issue. I carefully documented each step, saving iterations and recording my thought process on video for timestamp verification. On Monday, I slipped a flash drive to Tom. Just some thoughts, I said casually. 2 weeks later, Jeff announced a breakthrough in the sensor project. The engineering team had collaborated on a novel approach that would put TechVision ahead of competitors. As I took notes during the celebratory meeting, I watched Tom's eyes meet mine briefly. We both knew where the solution had originated. Over the next few months, Tom became my mentor and confidant. Late evenings after most employees had left, he would join me in my administrative corner and teach me about patent documentation. Ideas are valuable, he explained, but only if you can prove they're yours. The patent system exists for a reason. But I signed a contract with TechVision, I reminded him. Don't they own everything I develop? Tom's smile was knowing. I checked your contract carefully. As administrative staff, you're not subject to the same intellectual property assignments as technical employees. You're only required to assign rights to work done using company resources or during company time. What you develop at home, on your own time, with your own equipment, that's yours. This revelation changed everything. Under Tom's guidance, I began the painstaking process of patenting my innovations. It was expensive, draining my savings, but Tom assured me it would be worth it in the long run. Patents are assets, he said. They have real value, sometimes more than the companies that use them. For a year, we continued this arrangement. I would identify problems, develop solutions at home, document everything thoroughly, file patents in my name, and then anonymously feed the solutions back through Tom. The company's products improved, customers were happy, and slowly, my patent portfolio grew. Then came the day that changed everything. Tom invited me to lunch at a quiet restaurant far from the office. His face was pale, his normally robust frame noticeably thinner. "I have cancer," he said without preamble. Advanced. Aggressive. "I've known for a few weeks, but I wanted to tell you myself before rumors start." I reached across the table and grabbed his hand. Tom had become more than a mentor. He was my friend, the only person at TechVision who saw me for who I really was. "I'm starting treatment next week," he continued. "The prognosis isn't good, but I'm going to fight." His grip on my hand tightened. "But before I go, I need you to listen carefully. Keep patenting your innovations in your own name. Don't stop no matter what. Promise me." "I promise," I whispered, tears threatening. "There's something else you should know," Tom said, his voice lower. "The company is struggling more than they're letting on. Your sensor algorithm? It didn't just solve a technical problem. It saved the entire product line that accounts for 60% of our revenue." I stared at him, processing this information. "You have more power than you realize," Tom said, "but timing is everything. Be patient. Keep building your portfolio. The right moment will come." 3 months later, Tom died. The company held a brief memorial in the conference room, where executives praised his contributions while checking their watches. I sat silently in the back, the only person who truly understood what the company had lost. That night, I made a solemn vow to Tom's memory. I would continue our work, document everything, and wait for the right moment. I would play the long game. For the next 3 years, I maintained my dual life with methodical precision. By day, Annemarie the administrative assistant, efficient, pleasant, invisible. By night, Annemarie the engineer, innovative, determined, building a portfolio that no one knew existed. My patent application process became a well-oiled machine. I would identify problems during meetings, develop solutions at home, document every step with timestamps and video records, prepare patent applications with painstaking detail, and file them through a patent attorney I paid from my modest savings. Once the patents were filed, I would find ways to subtly introduce the solutions back into TechVision's workflow. The company began to thrive, largely on the back of breakthroughs that originated in my apartment lab. Our sensor technology leaped ahead of competitors. New contracts poured in. Stock prices climbed. Douglas Ward, who had once told me I was meant to support, not lead, received a substantial bonus and public praise for engineering leadership excellence. In a company-wide email, CEO Gordon Stewart credited Douglas's innovative thinking for pulling the company out of its slump. "The microprocessing advances in our latest generation of sensors represent the kind of forward thinking that sets TechVision apart," Gordon wrote. "Douglas and his team exemplify the innovation that drives our success." I read these words while sitting at my desk, processing purchase orders for the parts required by my own designs. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I took a strange pride in seeing my creations succeed, even if no one knew they were mine. Gordon promoted Douglas to Executive VP, giving him oversight of all technical departments. With this expanded authority, Douglas's management style became increasingly toxic. He took credit for successes, blamed failures on team members, and created an environment where fear replaced collaboration. Female engineers, already rare at TechVision, became even scarcer. New hires would arrive with enthusiasm and fresh ideas, only to be sidelined, ignored, or outright bullied until they resigned. As the executive assistant who processed HR paperwork, I saw the pattern clearly in exit interviews. Working here was like shouting into a void. One brilliant young engineer named Allison told me during her exit interview, "No one listens. No one acknowledges your contributions." I suggested the exact solution they ended up using for the Miller project, but in the final report, it was credited to Steve, who wasn't even on the team. I helped these women as much as I could, offering encouragement, documentation advice, and occasionally connecting them with other companies through my growing network of professional contacts. But I couldn't speak out without exposing my own secret campaign. By my 5th year at TechVision, 39 of my patents had been incorporated into the company's products. My innovations formed the technological backbone of our most profitable product lines. And no one except perhaps Tom, before his death, had any idea. Then came the Monday morning, when Gordon called an all-hands meeting. The company's stock had been climbing steadily for months, and rumors of expansion had circulated through the break rooms. I'm pleased to announce, Gordon began with unusual enthusiasm, that TechVision Dynamics has attracted the attention of Ascend Tech Corporation, one of the largest technology companies in the world. They've expressed interest in acquiring us, primarily due to our proprietary technology and innovative engineering solutions. Murmurs rippled through the assembled employees. Ascend Tech was a global giant, known for acquiring smaller companies with promising technology and scaling it worldwide. Douglas stepped forward, practically glowing with self-importance. Our proprietary microprocessor architecture, advanced signal processing algorithms, sensor miniaturization techniques, power optimization solutions, and interference mitigation systems represent exactly the kind of innovation Ascend Tech is looking to acquire. I sat frozen in my seat. Every single technology he had just listed came from my patents, my designs, my midnight engineering sessions, my ideas that Douglas had repeatedly claimed as his own. Due diligence will begin immediately, Gordon continued. A team from Ascend Tech will be reviewing all our technological assets, financial records, and intellectual property. Intellectual property. The words echoed in my head as the meeting concluded and employees dispersed, buzzing with excitement about potential stock options and career opportunities at a larger company. That afternoon, while sorting interdepartmental mail, I discovered an envelope misaddressed to Douglas Ward that should have gone to the legal department. Inside was a confidential acquisition document from Ascend Tech, listing key intellectual property assets that justified the acquisition price of $1.2 billion. There, in black and white, were patent numbers I recognized immediately. My patents. Assigned to Annemarie Harrison, licensed to TechVision through arrangements Tom had helped establish before his death. According to this document, these patents, my patents, represented over 70% of the company's technological value. My hands trembled as I resealed the envelope and sent it to its correct destination. The long game Tom had encouraged me to play was approaching its endgame, and I needed to prepare. 2 days after the announcement, Gordon called me into his office. Douglas was already there, reviewing documents on his tablet. Annemarie, Gordon said warmly, we have a special assignment for you during this acquisition process. Yes, sir? I maintained my pleasant, efficient demeanor. We need someone to coordinate all the meetings, organize the documentation flow, and essentially serve as the primary administrative contact for the Ascend Tech team. Your attention to detail and organizational skills make you the perfect choice. Douglas barely looked up. Make sure everything runs smoothly. These people expect perfection. Of course, I replied. I'll handle everything. And I did. I created detailed schedules, prepared meeting rooms, organized mountains of paperwork, and became the smiling face that greeted the Ascend Tech representatives each morning, all while using every spare minute to research patent law and acquisition procedures. I learned that in technology acquisitions, intellectual property transfers were typically the most complex part of the process. Companies wanted to ensure they were actually acquiring what they thought they were buying. Due diligence teams would trace the lineage of every significant patent, verify ownership, and confirm proper licensing arrangements. As coordinator, I had visibility into every aspect of the acquisition process. I saw which documents were requested, which executives were interviewed, and most importantly, which technologies Ascend Tech valued most highly. During one early meeting, I witnessed Douglas presenting his engineering team's accomplishments to the Ascend Tech executives. He spoke confidently about breakthrough innovations, my innovations, while the engineers who had supposedly created them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The interference mitigation system alone increased efficiency by 40%, Douglas boasted. That was a personal project I guided from concept to implementation. From my position against the wall, taking notes, and managing the presentation slides, I caught the eye of Julia Winters, Ascentech's lead counsel. Unlike her colleagues who were focused on Douglas, she was watching the engineers' reactions. Her slight frown told me she noticed their discomfort. After the meeting, as I collected the presentation materials, Julia approached me. Annemarie, right? You seem to keep this place running smoothly. I try my best, I replied with a professional smile. How long have you been with TechVision? 7 years. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Through all the major technological developments then? Yes, I've had a front row seat to the company's growth. Julia studied me for a moment. Interesting. I'd love to hear your perspective sometime. She handed me her business card before rejoining her team, leaving me to wonder if she suspected something wasn't quite right with Douglas's narrative. That evening, I contacted Sarah Rodriguez, a patent attorney recommended by a friend of Tom's. I explained my situation in general terms, without revealing specific technologies. If someone develops technologies independently, patents them personally, but allows a company to license and use them without the company acknowledging the true ownership publicly, what happens during an acquisition? I asked. Sarah's answer was clear. The acquiring company has the right to know exactly what they're buying. If they discover that critical patents are actually owned by an individual rather than the company they're acquiring, it could significantly impact the deal or even kill it entirely. And the individual who owns the patents would be in a very powerful position, Sarah said, especially if the acquiring company values those patents highly. I thanked her for her time, paid her consultation fee, and asked if she would be available should I need representation in the near future. She agreed. And suddenly, I had another ally. Over the next few weeks, I continued my flawless coordination of the acquisition process while carefully documenting every instance of Douglas claiming credit for my work. I recorded meetings, with proper notification signs posted as legally required, saved emails, and compiled a comprehensive evidence package. Then came the day that transformed my careful planning into urgent action. While delivering coffee to a meeting room where Gordon and Douglas believed they were alone, I overheard their post-acquisition plans. Once Ascentech owns the technology, we'll need to streamline operations, Gordon was saying. Most of the administrative staff can be let go immediately. Agreed, Douglas replied. Especially Harrison. She knows too much about day-to-day operations. Better to make a clean break. She's been loyal, Gordon noted, but business is business. The severance package in her contract is standard. I quietly backed away, my heart pounding. After 7 years of dedication, innovation, and literally creating the value they were selling, I was to be discarded with a standard severance package. The final insult. That night, I contacted Sarah Rodriguez again. I'd like to retain your services officially, I told her. Things are about to get complicated. For the first time in 7 years, I called in sick the next day. Instead of going to TechVision, I met with Sarah at her office, bringing my complete documentation, patent certificates, evidence of my contributions, recordings of Douglas taking credit for my work, and the misdirected acquisition document highlighting the value of my patents. Sarah reviewed everything carefully, her expression growing increasingly surprised. This is remarkable, Annemarie. You own the crown jewels of this acquisition. What should I do? I asked. Wait, she advised. The due diligence team will discover the patent assignments eventually. When they do, you'll be in a position of strength. In the meantime, continue as normal. Let the process play out. I returned to work the following day, apologizing for my absence and working twice as hard to show my dedication. As I organized the next phase of meetings, I learned that Ascentech was sending their specialized IP attorneys to conduct final reviews before closing the deal. The countdown had begun. The intellectual property review was scheduled for 3 days, but stretched into a week. As meeting coordinator, I arranged conference rooms, provided documentation, and ensured the visiting attorneys had everything they needed. I noticed they were spending an unusual amount of time reviewing patent documentation, often working late into the evening. Douglas became increasingly agitated as the review continued beyond its scheduled completion. "What's taking so long?" he demanded during a private meeting with Gordon that I was asked to minute. "We've provided everything they asked for. Alan Foster doesn't acquire companies without thorough vetting," Gordon replied, referencing a Centex CEO. "Their legal team is just being diligent, or they're looking for an excuse to lower the offer," Douglas muttered. "Annemarie, make sure they have whatever they need to finish this up. The delays are making everyone nervous." "Yes, sir," I replied, maintaining my composed exterior while internally counting down to the inevitable discovery. On the 8th day of the review, Julia Winters requested a meeting with Gordon and Douglas, with Alan Foster joining via video conference. As meeting coordinator, I was asked to be present to take notes. The conference room had a tense atmosphere as we gathered. Douglas was visibly irritated by the delays, while Gordon maintained a cautious optimism. On the large screen at the end of the table, Alan Foster appeared a sharp-eyed man in his 60s with a reputation for tough but fair negotiations. "Thank you all for your patience during our extended review," Julia began. "We've been thorough because, frankly, we've uncovered some inconsistencies that need clarification before we can proceed." Douglas straightened. "What inconsistencies?" "Our documentation is impeccable." Julia opened a folder. "It concerns the ownership of several key patents that form the technological foundation of TechVision's most valuable products." My heart began racing, but I kept my expression neutral as I took notes. "According to your presentations," Julia continued, "these technologies were developed by TechVision's engineering team under Mr. Ward's direction. However, our review shows that 39 critical patents are not owned by TechVision Dynamics at all." Gordon's face paled. "That's impossible. All our engineers sign standard IP agreements." "The patents in question," Julia said, sliding a document across the table, "are registered to an individual named Annemarie Harrison, who appears to have licensed them to TechVision through a series of agreements established approximately 4 years ago." All eyes turned to me. I set down my pen. "There must be a mistake," Douglas sputtered. "Annemarie is administrative staff. She's not an engineer." "That's what I'm trying to understand," Julia replied, "because according to United States Patent and Trademark Office records, Miss Harrison is the sole inventor on patents that represent approximately 75% of TechVision's technological value." On the screen, Alan Foster leaned forward. "Who is Annemarie Harrison?" he asked directly. Douglas waved dismissively toward me. "She's administrative staff," he repeated, as if saying it enough would make the problem disappear. "She's not involved in product development." Alan's gaze found me through the camera. "Miss Harrison? Would you care to clarify?" 7 years of being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed crystallized into a single moment of perfect clarity. I reached into my bag and removed a folder I had prepared months ago, waiting for exactly this opportunity. "I graduated with honors in electrical engineering from Ohio State 10 years ago," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "Due to the recession, I took an administrative position at TechVision. Despite multiple attempts to transfer to engineering roles, I was repeatedly told I was too valuable in my administrative capacity." I opened the folder, revealing my original design notes, prototype sketches, and development logs. I continued my engineering work independently, on my own time, with my own resources. Every patent registered in my name represents technology I developed outside of company time, using no company resources. Gordon stared at me in disbelief. That's not possible." "Actually, it is," Julia interjected. "We've reviewed Miss Harrison's employment contract. As administrative staff, she wasn't subject to the same intellectual property assignments as technical employees. Her contract only required assignment of work done using company resources or during company hours. She stole company property." Douglas exploded. "She had access to confidential information." I have video documentation of my independent development process for each patented technology, I replied calmly. Time-stamped, showing my work from concept to completion. I also have recordings of meetings where my ideas were appropriated without attribution. Alan Foster's expression had transformed from confusion to intense interest. Miss Harrison, would you be willing to meet with our technical team to discuss your innovations directly? Before I could answer, Douglas stood abruptly. This is corporate espionage. She'll be hearing from our attorneys. Alan's voice cut through the chaos. Mr. Ward, I suggest you consider your position carefully. If what Miss Harrison is saying is true, and our preliminary review suggests it is, then TechVision has been misrepresenting ownership of its core technology. That's a much more serious legal issue than an employee developing innovations on her own time. The room fell silent. In that moment, the power dynamic that had defined my professional life for 7 years shattered completely. I was no longer invisible. I was Annemarie Harrison, engineer and inventor, owner of the technology that had built TechVision's success. I would be happy to meet with your technical team, Mr. Foster, I said, looking directly into the camera. I believe we have a lot to discuss. The 24 hours following the revelation were chaotic. Gordon called an emergency board meeting, while Douglas launched a full-scale campaign to discredit me. By morning, security escorts were following me everywhere, my email access was restricted, and Human Resources had initiated an investigation into my violation of employment terms. I remained calm through it all, knowing I had prepared for this moment for years. When the HR director, Pamela Johnson, called me into her office, I arrived with Sarah Rodriguez at my side. I don't recall authorizing outside counsel for this meeting, Pamela said, frowning. As this pertains to my intellectual property rights, I felt legal representation was appropriate, I replied. The questioning lasted 3 hours, with Pamela repeatedly trying to establish that I had used company resources or time for my inventions. Sarah expertly deflected each attempt, presenting my meticulous documentation showing development timelines that occurred entirely outside work hours. Even if Ms. Harrison did conceptualize these innovations while thinking about company problems, Sarah explained, the actual development and reduction to practice occurred independently, using her own resources on her own time. Her employment contract is very specific about what constitutes assignable intellectual property. By afternoon, Gordon summoned me to his office. Douglas was notably absent. Annemarie, Gordon began, his tone conciliatory. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We've always valued your contributions to TechVision. My administrative contributions, perhaps, I replied. Never my engineering capabilities. Gordon sighed. The situation is complicated, but I'm sure we can find a resolution that works for everyone. What if we offered you an engineering position now, with appropriate compensation for past oversights? What position did you have in mind? I asked. Senior engineer, with stock options. I almost laughed. After 7 years of developing technology that had built the company's 9-figure valuation, he was offering me a mid-level position. That's generous, I said neutrally. What about recognition for my existing patents? Gordon shifted uncomfortably. We could discuss a formal licensing agreement, a fair royalty structure, and the acquisition would proceed as planned, with appropriate adjustments. I nodded thoughtfully. I'll need time to consider the offer. As I left Gordon's office, I received a text message from an unknown number. Coffee shop across street. 15 minutes. Julia Winters. The coffee shop was busy with afternoon customers when I arrived. Julia sat in a corner booth, 2 cups already on the table. Thank you for coming, she said as I joined her. I wanted to speak with you away from TechVision. Is this appropriate? I asked. Given the circumstances? Probably not, she admitted with a small smile. But I've never seen anything quite like this situation in 15 years of M&A work. She pushed a coffee toward me. How are you holding up? It's been intense, I admitted, but not unexpected. Julia studied me thoughtfully. You planned for this, didn't you? All of it. I prepared for the possibility, I corrected. There's a difference. She nodded. Smart. Very smart. She leaned forward. Look, I can't officially advise you, but off the record, don't accept whatever lowball offer they've made you. Your position is stronger than you might realize. Because of the patents? Because of the patents, yes, but also because of what you represent. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. Alan Foster is fascinated by your story. Ascentech doesn't just acquire technology, they acquire innovation capability. You've demonstrated extraordinary innovation under adverse conditions. I considered her words carefully. What happens now with the acquisition? That depends on how this resolves. Alan has paused the process pending clarification of the intellectual property situation. She checked her watch and stood. I should go. But remember, Annemarie, you've created significant value. Don't settle for less than you deserve. As Julia left, my phone buzzed with another message. This one from Douglas. My office, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Last chance to resolve this reasonably before legal action. I forwarded the message to Sarah, who replied immediately. Classic intimidation. Don't meet him alone. That evening, something unexpected happened. I received emails from 5 TechVision employees I barely knew, all expressing support. Jennifer from accounting wrote, "We've all seen how Douglas takes credit for others' work. What you're doing is brave." Marcus from the testing lab wrote, "The interference mitigation system never made sense coming from Douglas. He couldn't explain how it worked when we asked questions. Now we know why." A support group was forming organically within the company. People who had witnessed similar behavior, who had been silenced or sidelined, were finding their voices through my stand. By morning, the narrative within TechVision had shifted. I was no longer just the administrative assistant, claiming ownership of patents. I was the symbol of unrecognized contributions and stolen credit. I arrived at Douglas's office with Sarah at my side, to find Gordon already there. "This is a private meeting," Douglas snapped. "Not anymore," I replied calmly. "Anything you need to say can be said to both me and my attorney." Douglas launched into a tirade about loyalty, confidentiality, and threatened legal action for corporate espionage. Sarah calmly refuted each point, citing specific language from my employment contract and established case law on independent invention. Furthermore, she concluded, any lawsuit would involve discovery, where Miss Harrison's evidence of credit appropriation would become public record. I'm not sure that serves TechVision's interests. Gordon, who had been quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "Douglas, enough. This approach isn't productive." He turned to me. "Annemarie, what do you want?" Before I could answer, Douglas cut in. "She's trying to hijack the acquisition. After everything Tom did for her career, this is how she repays the company?" I froze at the mention of Tom. "What about Tom?" Douglas smirked. "Everyone knew about your special relationship with Tom Wyatt. How do you think you got those licensing agreements approved? He pushed them through before he died, never mentioning they were for his girlfriend. The accusation was so outrageous I almost laughed. Tom was 30 years my senior and happily married for 40 years. He was my mentor and friend. That's not how it looked to." A knock interrupted Douglas. His assistant opened the door. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Foster from Ascentech is here. He's requesting a meeting with Miss Harrison." Gordon and Douglas exchanged alarmed looks. "Now?" Gordon asked. "Yes, sir. He said it's urgent." I stood. "I should go see what Mr. Foster wants." "We're not finished here," Douglas warned. "I think we are," Sarah replied, gathering her papers. "Any further communication should come through me." As we walked toward the main conference room, Sarah whispered, "This is unusual. CEOs don't typically get involved at this stage." Alan Foster was alone in the conference room, reviewing documents on his tablet. He stood as we entered, extending his hand first to me, then to Sarah. Miss Harrison, thank you for meeting me. I hope you don't mind that I came in person. Some conversations shouldn't happen via video. Of course, I replied. This is my attorney, Sarah Rodriguez. Excellent, he said, gesturing for us to sit. I've asked Julia to join us shortly, but I wanted to speak with you directly first. He set his tablet aside. I've reviewed the technical documentation for your patents. Impressive work, particularly the signal processing algorithm that manages interference in confined spaces. That's an elegant solution. Thank you, I said, surprised by his technical knowledge. Before I was CEO, I was an engineer, he explained, reading my expression. I still review key technologies personally. He leaned forward. Annemarie, I came here today to make you an offer that has nothing to do with TechVision Dynamics. What kind of offer? Ascendtech acquires innovation, not just companies. Sometimes that innovation comes in unexpected packages. His eyes were steady. I'd like to offer you a position as Vice President of Innovation Development at Ascendtech, reporting directly to me, with appropriate compensation for your patents, of course. I stared at him, processing his words. You've demonstrated extraordinary technical creativity, persistence, and strategic thinking, he continued. Those are rare qualities and exactly what we value at Ascendtech. What about the acquisition of TechVision? I asked. That's a separate matter, he replied, though obviously complicated by the current situation. My offer to you stands regardless of how that resolves. As I considered his words, Julia entered the room. Sorry I'm late. Has Alan made his outrageous offer yet? Alan chuckled. Just did. Good. Julia sat beside him. Because we need to discuss next steps regarding TechVision. Sarah and I exchanged glances. This was moving faster than either of us had anticipated. What are you proposing? Sarah asked carefully. A reconfiguration of the acquisition, Julia explained. With your patents representing the majority of TechVision's value, we need to structure an agreement that properly recognizes ownership while still accomplishing our business objectives. Alan nodded. In simple terms, we'd like to acquire your patents directly from you, Annemarie, while still acquiring TechVision's operational capabilities and customer relationships. 2 parallel transactions. The implications were enormous. Not only was I being offered a leadership position at one of the world's largest technology companies, but I was also being recognized as the primary technological value creator at TechVision. I'll need time to consider this, I said. Of course, Alan replied. But not too much time. We'd like to move forward quickly. As we left the meeting, Sarah squeezed my arm excitedly. Do you realize what just happened? They're going around TechVision to deal with you directly. That's unprecedented. I did realize. After 7 years of invisibility, I had become the most visible person in the building. And for the first time, I held the power to determine not just my future, but TechVision's as well. 3 days later, representatives from TechVision, Ascendtech, and I gathered in the main conference room for what would be the defining meeting of the acquisition process. Gordon and Douglas represented TechVision, along with their legal team. Alan and Julia represented Ascendtech. I brought Sarah Rodriguez, now officially retained as my counsel. The tension was palpable, as everyone took their seats around the massive oak table. 7 years of hierarchical certainty had been upended. Gordon, usually confident and commanding, looked tired. Douglas, by contrast, radiated barely contained fury. Thank you all for coming, Alan began. We're here to discuss a restructured acquisition that addresses the intellectual property situation that has come to light. Gordon nodded tightly. We're open to reasonable adjustments. Before we begin, I said, I'd like to present a comprehensive proposal that might streamline our discussion. I distributed folders to everyone present. This outlines a framework for resolving the current situation in a way that serves everyone's interests. Douglas pushed his folder away without opening it. This is absurd. We shouldn't be negotiating with an employee who owns 75% of the technology you're trying to sell, Sarah interrupted smoothly. Miss Harrison is not here as an employee, Mr. Ward. She's here as the rightful owner of intellectual property critical to this transaction. Alan opened his folder and began reviewing my proposal. This is thorough, Annemarie. You've clearly given this careful thought. I've had 7 years to think about it, I replied. My proposal was straightforward. Ascentech would acquire my patents directly at fair market value, determined by independent assessment. TechVision would be acquired at a revised valuation reflecting its operational capabilities and non-patent assets. I would join Ascentech as Vice President of Innovation, while TechVision's employees would be integrated into Ascentech's organizational structure with job security guarantees. We've had the patents independently assessed, Julia said, referring to her notes. The fair market value is determined to be $412 million. The number hung in the air. Douglas made a choking sound. That's nearly half the original acquisition price, Gordon said weakly. Because the patents represent nearly half the value we were acquiring, Alan confirmed. The revised offer for TechVision's operations, customer relationships, and non-patent assets is $530 million. Combined with the patent acquisition, the total transaction value actually increases slightly. Gordon processed this information slowly, so the total deal value remains essentially the same. Correct, Julia confirmed. Just distributed differently to reflect actual ownership. Douglas slammed his hand on the table. This is extortion. She's using her relationship with Tom Wyatt to hijack the acquisition. I had anticipated this attack. I wondered when you'd return to that accusation, I said calmly, removing a small device from my bag. Since you seem determined to mischaracterize my professional relationship with Tom, perhaps we should hear from Tom himself. I pressed play on the recording device. Tom's voice, slightly weakened by his illness, but still clear, filled the room. This is Thomas Wyatt, Senior Engineer at TechVision Dynamics. I'm recording this statement on June 12, 2018, in the presence of my attorney, Barbara Collins. I wish to clarify the nature of my professional relationship with Annemarie Harrison. Miss Harrison is a talented engineer whose contributions to TechVision have been systematically appropriated without credit or compensation. I have witnessed Douglas Ward repeatedly claim credit for innovations that originated with Miss Harrison. The licensing arrangements I helped establish for her independently developed patents represent a small measure of justice for years of unacknowledged work. There has never been any romantic or inappropriate relationship between us, only mutual professional respect. I make this recording knowing I may not survive to defend her against the character attacks that will inevitably come when the truth about her contributions emerges. As the recording ended, the room fell silent. Douglas's face had drained of color. Tom knew you would try to discredit me, I said quietly. He prepared for it, just as I prepared for every other aspect of this moment. Alan cleared his throat. I think we've heard enough. Miss Harrison's proposal is acceptable to Ascentech. The only question is whether TechVision wishes to proceed with the revised terms or terminate discussions entirely. Gordon glanced at Douglas, whose rage had transformed into silent shock, then back to Alan. May we have the room to discuss privately? Of course, Alan replied. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. As we filed out, I caught fragments of Gordon's angry whisper to Douglas. 7 years. Cold have promoted her. Your ego cost us. 30 minutes later, we reassembled. Gordon spoke for TechVision, Douglas conspicuously silent beside him. We accept the revised terms, Gordon announced. With one condition. TechVision's executive leadership must have appropriate positions within the combined organization. Alan nodded. We can accommodate that, with appropriate adjustments based on performance evaluation and organizational fit. The message was clear. Positions would be available, but status wasn't guaranteed. Julia took over, outlining next steps for the parallel transactions. Papers were signed, hands were shaken, and within 2 hours, the framework for the new deal was established. My patents would be acquired directly by Ascentech. TechVision would be acquired separately, and I would step into a leadership role that recognized my true capabilities. As the meeting concluded, Gordon approached me privately. I owe you an apology, Annemarie. I should have recognized your potential years ago. Yes, you should have, I agreed. But it wasn't just me. How many other talented people did TechVision overlook or undervalue because they didn't fit a certain mold? He had no answer for that. The acquisition process took another month to complete. During that time, I continued my administrative duties while preparing for my new role. Douglas was relieved of his operational responsibilities, officially on special assignment until the acquisition closed. 3 weeks later, he resigned, unwilling to work in an organization where his carefully constructed facade had been shattered. On my final day at TechVision, I cleaned out my desk, packing 7 years of carefully maintained appearances into a single cardboard box. As I worked, Jennifer from accounting stopped by. We're going to miss you, she said. But what you did, it's changed things already. How so? She smiled. Gordon asked me to lead a task force on recognizing and developing internal talent. He specifically said we need to look beyond titles and traditional pathways. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. Change would come slowly, but it would come. 6 months later, I sat in my first board meeting at Ascendtech as Vice President of Innovation. The technology integration had gone smoothly, and the combined company was projecting record growth based largely on the expanded applications of my sensor technology. After the meeting, Alan asked me to stay behind. I have a proposal I'd like your input on, he said, sliding a document across the table. An innovation recognition program. I reviewed the outline, a comprehensive framework for identifying, documenting, and rewarding innovations throughout the organization, regardless of where they originated. This is excellent, I said. Especially the part about innovation pathways for non-technical staff. Alan nodded. That was inspired by your story. Talent doesn't always come with the expected credentials or in the expected packages. I thought of Tom, who had recognized my potential when no one else would. No, it doesn't. That afternoon, I interviewed candidates for a new administrative assistant position in the innovation division. The final interviewee was a young woman named Danielle, who had recently graduated with an engineering degree but couldn't find technical work due to lack of experience. I notice you've applied for an administrative role, but your degree is in electrical engineering, I said, reviewing her resume. She nodded nervously. The job market is tight. I figured I could get my foot in the door and hopefully transfer to engineering eventually. Her words echoed my own thoughts from 7 years earlier. But her story would be different. I have a better idea, I told her. We have an innovation mentorship program designed specifically for people like you. Administrative duties part-time, engineering development part-time, with a clear pathway to a full technical role. Her eyes widened. Really? That would be amazing. As she left my office, bubbling with excitement, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From invisible administrative assistant to patent owner to executive, from taking notes in meetings to leading them. I had played the long game, just as Tom advised. I had documented my contributions, stood my ground, and ultimately transformed not just my career, but an entire corporate approach to innovation and talent. The nameplate on my office door read, Annemarie Harrison, VP of Innovation. But the real title I had earned was more meaningful. I was the admin who owned the company not through hostile takeover or financial manipulation, but through the power of my own creative mind and the patience to wait for the perfect moment to reveal it. In my first company-wide innovation address, I shared the most important lesson from my journey. Your job title doesn't define your contribution. Your mind does. Never let anyone convince you that where you sit determines what you can create. Have you ever felt your talents were overlooked or undervalued at work? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories of triumph over workplace adversity, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their true worth. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone underestimates.